Today we're going to learn about the famous astronomer, Galileo. Galileo Galilei, commonly known simply as Galileo, has been called the father of modern astronomy, modern physics, modern science, and the scientific method. He was an astronomer, inventor, a physicist, and an engineer. Galileo was born on February 15, 1564, in what is now Pisa, Italy. He was the oldest of 6 children born to Vincenzo Galilei, a musician and composer, and Giulia Ammannati. As a young man, he considered joining the priesthood, but his father wanted him to study medicine instead. At age 17, he enrolled in the University of Pisa and began his studies. While there, he happened to hear a geometry lecture by chance, which kindled a love of mathematics. He persuaded his father to allow him to change his course of study, even though mathematicians were not as well paid as doctors, but had to drop out of college in 1585 because he ran out of money. Despite this, Galileo continued to study mathematics, the natural sciences, and art. A few years later, he began teaching at the Academy of Arts and Drawing in Florence, and was later appointed to the chair of mathematics in Pisa. After his father's death in 1591, Galileo got a job in Padua, teaching geometry, mechanics, and astronomy. Throughout all this, Galileo was beginning to make scientific discoveries. He invented a hydrostatic balance to accurately measure small quantities. He constructed the thermoscope, a kind of early thermometer. He developed a water pump that became the basis for modern pumps. He also developed the plans for the first pendulum clock. Galileo is most famous, however, for his improvements to the telescope. Contrary to popular belief, he is not the inventor of the telescope. No one knows who first invented it. The first patent for a telescope was filed in 1608 in the Netherlands by spectacle maker Hans Lippershey. These early spyglasses only magnified things 3 times. Galileo heard about them in 1609 and decided that he could do better. He reproduced the original spyglass within a day, and within months he had a telescope that magnified his view by 8 times. Finally, he produced one that magnified 23 times, and it is with this telescope that he began his astronomical observations. On November 30th, 1609, Galileo used his new tool to look more closely at the moon, with surprising results. At the time, the moon was thought to be smooth and perfect, like a gemstone. Upon closer inspection, Galileo realized that the moon had mountains and craters. Just over a month later, on January 7th, 1610, Galileo wrote that he had made a strange discovery near Jupiter. He saw what he described as 3 stars, so small they were nearly invisible, next to the planet. Over the next few days, he observed them moving in a way that did not make any sense if they were actually stars. The only thing that would make sense was if they were orbiting Jupiter. When Galileo announced these findings, it caused an uproar. At the time, it was believed that all heavenly bodies circled the Earth, not something else. Many astronomers at first refused to believe that such a thing could be possible. Soon, though, Galileo's discovery was confirmed by astronomers in other observatories, and everything began to change. Next, Galileo turned his telescope on Venus. It was believed, since Venus was thought to orbit the Earth, that it could not display all of the phases that the Moon did, only some of them, When he found that Venus did go through all the phases, Galileo realized that the only explanation for it was that Venus orbited the Sun. Once again, Galileo's discovery caused an uproar among astronomers. As a result, most astronomers changed their view of the universe. Instead of everything orbiting the Earth, they thought, perhaps most of the planets orbited around the Sun, and then the Sun and Moon orbited around the Earth. It seemed that everything Galileo observed with his telescope had something new to show him. He observed the rings of Saturn, although he could not tell what they were. He saw spots on the Sun. He discovered that the cloudy stretch of the Milky Way was actually made up of closely packed stars too far away to be seen by the naked eye. Not everyone was happy with Galileo's new ideas about the universe. At the time, the Catholic Church taught that the Earth was immovable and that everything in the heavens must rotate around it. Galileo's assertion that things were orbiting around the Sun was therefore contradicting the teachings of the Church. In 1616, he was called before the Roman Inquisition and put on trial. He was ordered to abandon his ideas that some objects circled the Sun, and never to teach them again. Galileo obeyed, for a while. As he continued to study the heavens, he became convinced that the Earth, in fact, orbited the Sun. In 1632, he wrote a book in which he described why he thought this. This was considered heresy by the Church, directly opposing what they taught. Galileo was put on trial again and forced to recant or publicly deny his belief that the Earth went around the Sun. According to popular legend, he then muttered the famous phrase, "And yet it moves." Galileo was sentenced to house arrest for the rest of his life. Although confined to his home, Galileo did not stop his scientific investigations. He focused more on physics and mechanics, continuing to publish his writings until he went blind in 1638. On January 8, 1642, at the age of 77, Galileo died. Due to his disfavor with the Church, he was originally buried in a small room in the Basilica of Santa Croce. Nearly 100 years later, after attitudes had changed, a monument was built in the basilica in his honor, and he was reburied near it. Today, Galileo is regarded as a pioneer of modern science. His insistence on conducting experiments and relying on observation instead of what he was told by others helped create the modern scientific method. His contributions to the fields of physics, astronomy, cosmology, mathematics, and philosophy has formed the foundation of many of these sciences. During his lifetime, Galileo paid a high price for these discoveries, but today he is considered one of the most important figures in the history of science. I hope you enjoyed learning about Galileo Galilei today. Goodbye till next time.